Dead America, The Soldier, Caravan, Part 2, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. The transport truck rumbled slowly down the back road, far off the main highway. Tully kept it slow, barely above 30 miles an hour, giving him ample time to navigate. The road was a narrow 2-lane strip of patched asphalt that rose and fell with the land, running through country that alternated between stands of tall pine and open stretches of pasture gone shaggy at the fence lines. Kudzu had swallowed whole sections of the roadside, draping the trees and power poles in green until they lost their shapes, and the ditches on either side were deep enough that a wheel dropped into one wasn't coming back out without help. Cattle stood in one of the pastures they passed, a dozen head bunched together near a pond, watching the truck go by with the placid indifference of animals that had no idea the world had ended. A little further on, a farmhouse sat at the end of a long gravel drive with its front door shut, and a truck parked square in the carport, and it was impossible to tell from the road whether anyone inside was alive, dead, or something in between. The roads were far from clear. Several abandoned cars dotted the landscape, several wrecked, blocking lanes of the road. They came up in ones and twos. A sedan nosed into the ditch here, a minivan stopped dead in the middle of the lane there, and Tully worked the big rig around each of them, with small, unhurried adjustments of the wheel, reading the gaps a quarter-mile out and setting up his line early. Flint studied some as they drove by, seeing slumped-over drivers and passengers, not moving. Most of the windows were intact, the glass fogged from the inside in a way he had learned not to look at too closely. Whatever had happened in those cars had happened days ago, and the heat had been working on them ever since. "Any idea what happened here?" Flint asked. "Sick people who had no business being out of bed were out here on the roads when they turned," Tully said. "Caused a hell of a mess." Flint had seen it all before, drivers turning into zombies as they drove, taking other cars out with them. He looked at the next wreck as they passed, seeing that the driver's side window had a small hole in it. The driver slumped over the steering wheel. Somebody had come along afterward and done what needed doing, either out of mercy or self-preservation. There was no way of telling which, and Flint supposed it didn't much matter to the man behind the wheel. "Not really a fate I'd wish on anybody," Flint said. "I don't know. I go back and forth on who are the lucky ones," Beckett said. Flint glanced back at the young soldier. There was no self-pity in the way he had said it. It was just the blunt reality that everybody still breathing had run through their heads at some point over the last 10 days, spoken out loud in a truck cab where nobody was going to judge him for it. "Hell, son, I'm still above ground. I consider that lucky," Tully said. "Are you sure, Tully? We're out here risking our lives on the back roads, death around every corner, and you consider that lucky?" Tully let out a laugh. "Clearly you haven't spent many nights sleeping in rural truck stop parking lots. What we're doing now is actually a lot safer." Tully and Flint let out a laugh, with Beckett eventually joining in. The sound of it filled the cab for a moment, and then faded back under the drone of the engine, and the three of them settled into the easy quiet of men watching the country roll by. The hula girl bobbed along on the dash with the rhythm of the road, her spring creaking faintly on the harder bumps. The laughter died down as they passed a sign on the road reading, "Hazelhurst, 1 mile." The sign was pocked with old birdshot dents that had been there long before the world fell apart. But somebody more recent had spray-painted a crooked X across the face of it. Whether it was a warning or just vandalism, there was no way to know. "Keep your heads on a swivel," Tully said. Flint and Beckett tensed up a bit, gripping their weapons but not lifting them up. Flint shifted in his seat, angling himself toward the door, his eyes starting the slow sweep between the road ahead and the tree line that he could hold for hours when he needed to. "If there's trouble, then why are we going this way?" Beckett asked. "Because no matter which way we go, it's going to be trouble," Tully said. "And we're going to need gas sooner rather than later, and there's a truck stop a few miles on the other side of town." "What are you expecting?" Flint asked. "Not expecting anything. But I've been running these routes long enough to know that if there's someplace someone can hide, there's a chance there's someone there, and I've yet to have a positive experience when they pop out unannounced." The soldiers tensed up a bit as they watched out either side of the truck as they approached the edge of town. The pines fell away, and the first structures started coming up along the road. A self-storage lot with its gate standing open. A church with a gravel parking lot. A pair of metal buildings that might have been small engine shops or feed suppliers. A water tower rose up over the trees ahead, the town's name painted across the tank in letters gone chalky from years of sun. Hazelhurst was little more than a dot on a map, not even a one-stoplight town. There were several blocks of houses and buildings, with very little moving. The houses sat back from the road behind yards that had gone to seed, the grass knee-high, garden hoses lying uncoiled in driveways where somebody had dropped them and never come back. A tricycle sat on its side at the edge of one lawn. The porches were empty, the windows dark, and the whole place had the held-breath stillness that Flint had come to know from a dozen towns like it. It wasn't the stillness of a place that had been evacuated, it was the stillness of a place where everything that was going to happen had already happened. The first few blocks were uneventful, just a smattering of abandoned cars, a few corpses laying on the ground, their heads missing chunks. The bodies had been down for days, sun-darkened and shrunken into their clothes, scattered in the loose, accidental way of people who had fallen where they were caught. One lay across the sidewalk in front of a small brick post office. Two more were in the road near an intersection, close together, as if they had been running the same direction when they went down. "Well, somebody put up a fight at some point," Beckett said. "Doesn't look like they won out in the end, however," Flint said. Flint pointed up to the next block as a half-dozen zombies came shambling out from the side of a building. They came in the slow, scattered drift of creatures that had been on their feet for days, heads down, arms slack, drawn out of whatever shade they had been standing in by the sound of the engine. Their clothes told the story of the town: a man in coveralls, a woman in a sundress gone stiff with old blood. One of them dragged a foot that turned inward at a bad angle, the body hitching sideways with every step to compensate. Flint rolled down his window just enough to allow him to stick his rifle out, training it on the building. He knew that if there was a group of zombies there, then something must have been holding them there. Tully feathered the gas, keeping the speed up, but was ready to floor it if things got bad. The big rig rolled through the block at a steady clip, the trailer swaying gently behind them, and the creatures angled toward the sound without any hope of intercepting it. A couple zombies stepped out into the road, bouncing off the front grille of the truck as it rolled by. The impacts came up through the frame as dull thuds, one body spinning away into the opposite lane, the other going down under the bumper's push and sliding along the asphalt. Neither of the soldiers flinched at it. 10 days into the end of the world, it had already become the kind of thing a man stopped flinching at. Flint aimed his rifle into the front window of the building, which was a diner, but relaxed when he saw a couple of zombies smacking against the glass from the inside. The diner was a small place with a hand-painted sign and a row of booths along the front window, and the creatures inside were pressed up against the glass with their palms flat against it, mouths working, drawn by the ones outside, the same way the ones outside had been drawn by them. However long they had been in there, the ones in the parking lot had been keeping them at the window, and the ones at the window had been keeping the others in the parking lot. Round and round, nobody going anywhere. "We're good here," Flint said. "Just a zombie feedback loop." Beckett and Tully breathed a sigh of relief as they continued rolling through the town. They passed the heart of it a block later, a short strip of storefronts facing the rail line, a bank with its doors shut, a hardware store with plywood over one window, a gas station on the corner with both pumps bagged and a handwritten sign in the window too faded to read from the road. A dog trotted across a side street 2 blocks down, thin but moving with purpose, and disappeared between 2 houses. It was the only living thing they saw. The rest of the town slid by the same way. Houses with their doors shut tight, houses with their doors standing open, a school with an empty flagpole, and a parking lot scattered with cars. At the far end of a cross street, Flint caught a glimpse of more figures shambling in the road, too far off to count, drifting in the direction of the engine noise like leaves pulled along in a slow current. As they reached the edge of town, Flint looked in the side mirror, seeing that the group of 6 zombies had grown to several dozen, pulled out from hiding by the engine noise. They came out from between the buildings and out of the side streets in a ragged, spreading crowd, filling the road behind the truck, all of them locked onto the sound and following it at the only speed they had left. The crowd stretched and thinned as the truck pulled away, the fastest of the shamblers out front, the broken ones trailing behind, until the whole procession shrank down into the mirror, and the water tower rose up behind them over the trees. Flint watched them for a long moment. Every one of those creatures had lived in this town a week and a half ago. They had eaten at that diner and cashed checks at that bank and sent their kids to that school, and now they were a crowd of dead things chasing an engine sound down a road they used to drive to work. There was nothing left here to save, and nothing left worth the fuel it would cost to try. When we get back to base, I think we can mark this down as a dead town, Flint said. Chapter 2. The truck rumbled down the road for another 10 minutes, the path mostly clear. The country north of town gave way to longer stretches of pine, the trees crowding in close on both sides, before pulling back to reveal the occasional clearing. A mobile home on a cleared half-acre. A small cinder-block church with a gravel lot. A couple of zombies shambled out from an overturned car on the other side of the road, but the truck was past them before they could reach it. Flint watched them fall away in his mirror, two figures standing in the middle of the empty lane, with their arms half raised, turning in slow confusion after the sound. "The truck stop is about a mile up," Tully said. "Are the pumps going to be working?" Flint asked. "The power is most likely out, which means we're going to have to get the generator going." "I can handle that," Beckett said. "No, I want you two focused on protection. The generator is at the back of the building, and I can handle it. Once we're up and running, I am going to need someone to go inside to get the pumps flowing." "I'll take care of it," Flint said. "Beckett, I want you by the truck, making sure we don't get any unwanted attention." Beckett nodded, everyone getting prepared as they pulled into the truck stop. Flint dropped his window, and Beckett shifted forward in the third seat, both of them running their eyes over the property as Tully swung the rig off the road, the trailer rocking gently as the wheels came off the asphalt and onto the apron. The place sat on a wide gravel and asphalt lot, carved out of the pines, a low, flat-roof building with a canopy out front, covering 2 islands of car pumps, and a taller canopy off to the side over the diesel island, where the ground was stained dark from years of spills. A sign on a tall pole rose above it all, the plastic faces of it dark and one of them cracked. A rack of propane tanks stood caged and padlocked beside the front doors, untouched, and a payphone hung on the outside wall with its receiver dangling at the end of its cord. There were a few vehicles parked at the far end of the lot, with a couple abandoned at the pumps. One sat with its fuel door hanging open and the nozzle still seated in the tank, the hose stretched taut from the pump, like the driver had simply walked away mid-fill. One body lay beside a pump, not moving. It had been there long enough that the weather had worked on it, and nobody suggested taking a closer look. Tully pulled the truck into the diesel truck pump, stopping it. He cut the engine, everybody pouring out of the cab in a hurry. The quiet that came down after the engine died was thick. No hum from the coolers inside, no traffic sound from the road, nothing but the tick of the cooling engine and the wind moving through the tops of the pines at the edge of the lot. Flint and Beckett swept the area, not seeing any movement. Flint worked his half in a slow arc, checking the gaps between the parked vehicles at the far end, the corners of the building, the shadowed strip along the base of the canopy where the light didn't reach. Beckett mirrored him on the other side, his rifle up, his feet moving in the steady sidestep of a man covering ground without ever settling his weight. "I'm clear," Flint said. "Same here," Beckett said. "All right, I'll get that generator going," Tully said. Tully moved toward the back of the building, while Flint moved with him for a moment until he could see that the path to the generator was clear. The rear of the building was a service strip of bare concrete, a dumpster against the wall, a stack of wooden pallets, and a steel enclosure housing the generator with its access panel shut but unlocked. Nothing moved back there. Tully was already walking the enclosure, checking the fuel gauge on the tank beside it and muttering to himself in the tone of a man who had coaxed 100 stubborn machines to life in his day. Once Flint saw that it was clear, he broke towards the front door. Flint came up beside the window, looking inside. The store area of the truck stop was a wreck. Shelves overturned, products scattered about on the floor. Bags of chips and candy lay trampled flat in the aisles, and a rack of sunglasses had gone over near the register, spreading its stock across the tile in a fan of cheap plastic. He also noticed that a couple of the shelves were bare, revealing that someone had been here since the apocalypse broke out. The stripping had been selective. The bottled water was gone. The canned goods were gone. What remained was the stuff that didn't keep a person alive, and it had been left where it fell. Flint ducked back behind cover as he saw movement inside the store. He pressed his back to the brick beside the window and held there for a beat, listening, then peeked back through, getting a good look at the figures, seeing that they were slow and uncoordinated. They drifted between the aisles without aim, bumping the shelving as they went, one of them dragging a wire basket that had somehow gotten looped around its wrist. The basket scraped and clattered along behind it with every step, and none of the others so much as turned at the sound. "Either you're a morning drinker or you're a zombie," Flint said. Flint stared at them for another few moments, confirming that they were zombies. Flint ducked down underneath the window, moving up towards the door. He took a knee beside it, giving it a slight push, revealing that it was unlocked. Before he could move, the lights clicked back on, the hum of the generator coming from the back of the building. Inside the store, the coolers along the back wall shuddered to life, and the pumps out front lit up under the canopy. Flint pushed the door open, a loud bell ringing as he did. "Damn it," Flint said. Flint moved swiftly through the door towards the front counter. A zombie stepped out from behind it, receiving the business end of the cleaver to the face. The creature had been a big man in life, a trucker's build under a stained shirt, but the size meant nothing once the blade landed. Flint yanked it free, shoving the body off to the side. It went down against the cigarette display behind the counter, taking a rack of lighters with it. As he moved behind the counter, he heard excited moans coming from the far end of the building. He looked over, seeing a dozen zombies shambling towards him, the closest one 10 yards away. They came out from the aisles and around the end caps in a loose, converging wave, their feet dragging through the scattered product, knocking cans and bottles skidding across the tile. The one with the basket on its wrist swung it into a shelf as it turned, the clatter of it setting off a fresh round of moans from the others. He remained calm, looking at the gas pump switches, flipping all the diesel ones on before coming out from behind the counter. Moving at a steady, unhurried pace, he weaved between the overturned shelving without breaking stride, stepping over a spill of motor oil bottles, keeping himself a comfortable margin ahead of the crowd without spending any energy he didn't need to. The moans behind him continued to grow, but he was unconcerned. He grabbed a set of jumper cables off a display rack before exiting the building, the bell over the door ringing again on his way out. Flint quickly wrapped them around the door handle, securing it to the other side of the swinging double doors. With a forceful tug, he tightened it up. Pulling on the door, he saw that it was locked up tight. Through the glass, the first of the creatures arrived and pressed itself against the door, its palms flat against the glass, the whole assembly rattling in its frame, but holding. "It's not going to hold forever, but should be long enough for us to get what we need and get out of here," Flint said. Flint flinched as a gunshot went off from the truck. He raised his weapon, sweeping the area, but not seeing a threat. As another shot went off, he ran over towards the truck, keeping low as he crossed the lot, his boots crunching over the pavement. The reports were measured and spaced, which told him Beckett wasn't panicking, but he closed the distance fast all the same. As he came around the truck, he saw what Beckett was firing at. There were a few dozen zombies shambling out from the tree line, about 30 yards away. They came through the brush at the edge of the lot in a broken line, pushing out from between the pines in 2s and 3s, more shapes moving in the shadows behind them. The generator had rung the dinner bell, and the woods were answering. Beckett dropped another one, prompting Flint to yell out, "Don't waste your ammo. We'll be long gone by the time they get here." Tully heard Flint, then let out a whistle to get his attention. "It's going to take about 5 minutes to fill this bad boy up," Tully said. Flint let out a sigh before turning to Beckett. "Okay, maybe a few shots." The two soldiers picked their targets, dropping zombies as they got within 20 yards of the truck. They worked without hurry, letting the creatures close the distance before spending the rounds, each shot putting a body down onto the gravel. One went over backwards into the one behind it and took them both to the ground, and only one of them got back up. The rest of the crowd kept coming over the fallen without so much as a downward glance, the gaps in the line filling in as more of them cleared the tree line. Behind the soldiers, the diesel pump ran its slow count, the numbers rolling over with an agonizing lack of urgency, while Tully stood at the tank with the nozzle locked open, watching the crowd with one hand resting on the truck like he could hurry it along through encouragement. After 10 shots between them, Tully let out another whistle. "Let's get the hell out of here, boys," Tully said. The soldiers piled into the truck, Tully starting it up and pulling out. The rig rolled out from under the canopy and swung wide across the lot, the trailer clearing the pumps with room to spare, and Tully brought it up through the gears as they hit the road. The hula girl bobbed through the turn, riding it out with her usual good cheer. Behind them, the closest of the creatures shuffled through the space the truck had just left, turning to follow the sound. They looked at the mirrors, zombies shambling after them, with no hope of catching up. The crowd spread out along the road in a long, trailing line, shrinking with every second. And back beyond them, the truck stop sat lit up under its canopy in the middle of all that stillness, the generator running for nobody. The dozen creatures inside the store still pressed against the jumper cable doors. "Hey, Flint, I don't suppose you grabbed me a bag of chips from the shop, did you?" Beckett asked. "Sorry, Beckett, too long of a line. Didn't have time." Beckett gave an exaggerated pout, prompting them to laugh. Chapter 3. The group continued driving down the road, Tully keeping them at a reasonable speed, even though there wasn't much of anything on the stretch ahead of them. The land had flattened out some, the pines giving way in places to bottomland, where the road ran on a low causeway between stretches of standing water and cypress. A heron stood in the shallows off the shoulder, one leg up, and didn't so much as ruffle a feather as the rig rolled past. For a few miles it was almost possible to pretend the world was still whole out here, that the empty road was just a quiet stretch on an ordinary run. As they went, the CB radio crackled to life. "Anybody on this channel? Come back." Tully reached up, grabbing the receiver, clicking it on. Flint watched the driver's face change in the space of a breath, the road weariness dropping away, replaced by something between hope and disbelief. "Earl, is that you?" Tully asked. "Tully? Yeah, man, it's Earl. Where the hell are you?" "About 30 miles southeast of Hazelhurst, coming up on Monticello." Earl started to speak, but gunfire could be heard in the background. It came through the speaker in a flat, crackling burst, the small sound of it carrying none of the weight of the real thing and all of the meaning. "Jesus Christ!" Earl shouted. "Earl, are you good, buddy?" Tully asked. Earl let out screams as more gunshots popped off. Everybody in the cab got concerned. Beckett came forward out of the third seat, gripping the backs of both front seats, his eyes on the radio like he could see through it. Flint sat still, listening past the screaming for anything underneath it, counting the shots, trying to build the picture on the other end. "Earl, talk to me, brother. Where are you?" Tully asked. "Gas station north of Columbia." More gunshots popped off on the radio before it cut out with a loud shriek, as if something hit it. Earl, come back, buddy," Tully said. Nothing but static. The empty hiss of it filled the cab, and Tully sat there with the receiver up near his mouth and his thumb still on the key, waiting for something that wasn't coming. His eyes stayed on the road out of pure habit, but everything else in the man had gone somewhere else. Beckett looked to Flint, and Flint gave a small shake of his head. Not yet. "Where is Columbia?" Flint asked. "About 30 miles southeast of here." Flint thought about it for a moment before nodding. "Might be time to pick up the pace a bit, Tully." The truck driver nodded, pushing the gas pedal down, the truck pushing 50, then 60 as they screamed down the road. Tully locked completely in, not talking, not distracted, hyper-focused on the road ahead. Rather than swerve when a zombie stepped out from the tree line, he gripped the wheel tighter, the truck barely registering as the creature bounced off the front grille. The wrecks and stalls that he had eased around all morning, he now read and threaded at speed, setting the rig's line through the gaps early and holding it, the trailer swaying through the corrections. Twice the shoulder took a wheel where the pavement pinched down, gravel roaring up into the wells, and twice Tully brought it back onto the blacktop without a word or a flicker of expression. The hula girl on the dash danced hard through all of it. Flint had ridden with a lot of drivers over the years. He filed away the observation that Tully at 60 miles an hour on a compromised road was a fundamentally different man than Tully in a tent telling jokes, and that both of them were worth having. As they drove, Flint grabbed the CB radio, clicking it on. "Earl, are you there? Is anybody there?" Nothing but static coming back. "I'll try again in a few minutes," Flint said. "Don't bother, you heard what I heard." Rather than push the issue, Flint nodded, hanging the receiver back on its cradle before turning attention to his rifle. He popped out the half-spent magazine, putting in a fresh one. Beckett noticed what the sergeant was doing, joining in and mimicking his action. The metallic sounds of the swap were loud in the cab, purposeful, the two soldiers moving through the ritual of men getting ready for something, without needing to name what it was. As they continued driving, they were in silence, the only sound the engine and the tires rolling down the road. The country rolled by unnoticed, the miles falling away under the big rig's push, and the silence in the cab had a different quality than the easy quiet of the morning. Nobody wanted to say out loud what the radio had already told them. As soon as Flint saw the sign for Columbia being 2 miles away, he finally broke the silence. "Tully, I'm going to need you to stop a mile from the gas station." "Hell no. I've known Earl for years, and we're getting to him." Flint didn't raise his voice, but the forcefulness could be felt in his tone. "If you rush in and there's real trouble, it's only going to get us killed." "But Earl, I know, but I need you to trust me." Tully contemplated for a moment, giving a reluctant nod. His hands stayed tight on the wheel, the knuckles pale, but his foot came off the gas by degrees and the speedometer started its slow fall. "As soon as we stop, I want you and Beckett to get to the tree line," Flint said. "If anybody approaches the truck, make them regret it." Beckett nodded as Tully began to slow the truck down. "The gas station is about a mile up on the right," Tully said. Flint nodded and prepared to move. He gave his vest a quick pat-down, checking the seating of the magazines and the cleaver on his hip by feel, then rolled his shoulders once and set his hand on the door handle. "I'll be back before you know it. If there is trouble and you get a chance to escape, do it." "What about you?" Beckett asked. "I'll figure it out, and I know your channel." Flint pointed to the CB radio, getting a nod from Tully. As soon as the truck stopped, Flint jumped out, pumping his legs hard into the trees at the side of the road. Behind him, he heard the doors of the cab open and shut, Beckett's voice low as he moved Tully off the road, and then the sounds of them were gone, and there was only his own breathing and the woods. Flint weaved through the trees, small branches breaking off on him as he lowered his head through them. The woods were thick with undergrowth, brambles catching at his pants, the ground soft and uneven under the pine straw, and he pushed through it all at the fastest pace the terrain would let him hold. Somewhere off to his left, the land fell away toward the river bottom, and the air had the green, wet smell of standing water. He kept the road at a fixed distance on his right, checking it through the trunks every 100 yards, using it as his handrail without ever exposing himself on it. As he got half a mile into the woods, he heard a few gunshots popping off ahead. They came in a lazy scatter, one here, two there, without any answering fire, and the pattern of it told him what he needed to know. That wasn't a fight, that was a cleanup. As he got closer, he spotted a few zombies shambling through the woods, their backs to him. They were pushing toward the gunfire the same way he was, drawn along through the trees in a ragged drift. Flint broke out the cleaver, taking off the backs of their heads as he ran, barely breaking stride. The bodies dropped away behind him one after another, folding down into the undergrowth, and he kept his momentum through every swing, letting the blade do the work. The gunshots ahead died down, concerning him. Flint picked up the pace, seeing the opening at the end of the woods getting closer, the light through the trunks going from green to open gray. Flint rushed up, sliding to a stop behind the last tree, yanking his rifle free from his shoulder and bringing it up. Flint lowered it and ducked back behind cover when he saw 4 pickup trucks filled with armed men around the tractor trailer. He set his shoulder against the bark and worked his eyes over the scene in slices. The gas station was a small 2-pump operation on the near side of the road, and the tractor trailer sat in the middle of its lot at an angle that said it had stopped in a hurry. The 4 pickups were parked around it in a loose diamond, and the men in and around them were not a mob. He counted a dozen or more, and they stood spaced out, covering their sectors, weapons held with the casual competence of men who had done this before. There was no shouting, no celebrating, none of the loose swagger he would have expected from road bandits picking over a kill. They talked in short exchanges when they talked at all. 3 of the men were replacing tires that had been damaged during the firefight, working quick and clean with a bottle jack and a 4-way, and nobody had to stand over them telling them what to do. Flint looked at the ground, spotting 3 men laying face down, motionless. 2 of them appeared to be soldiers, the other a truck driver. A few more shots popped off from the men, drawing Flint's attention. He looked over, seeing zombies dropping to the ground at the edge of the tree line. The shooters barely shifted their stances to do it, tracking the creatures as they came out of the woods and putting them down with single-aimed shots, unhurried, the way a man might knock cans off a fence rail. The dead were an annoyance to them, nothing more. Flint watched the group as they finished putting the new tires on the truck, one man getting into it and starting it up. The rest of them collapsed their perimeter in an orderly rotation, each man falling back to his vehicle while the others held their sectors, and the doors slammed shut down the line in a quick rattle. Within moments, the caravan drove off to the south, leaving the scene quiet. The engine sounds faded down the road, and the stillness came back in behind them, broken only by the shuffle of the few creatures still working their way out of the trees on the far side of the lot. Flint got up, Walking over to the bodies, inspecting them, all 3 men were filled with bullet holes, most of them center mass, signifying people who knew how to shoot. There was no wasted spray around the bodies, no wild pattern of misses chewed into the pavement. The men who had done this had picked their shots and made them count, and then they had gone about changing tires like it was a job site. The 2 soldiers had gone down within a few feet of each other near the trailer, their weapons gone, their pouches stripped. The trucker lay nearest the pumps. Flint stood over him for a moment. He had never seen Earl's face, and never would now, but he had heard the man's voice not an hour ago, alive and glad to find a friend on the channel. Flint looked down the road in the direction the thieves drove. "It looks like we're going to have our hands full today.